All right, more on that canceling out on the markets. But first, to the east side of Manhattan right now, what you're looking at is the apartment building of one Henry Kissinger. Remember him, the 92-year-old foreign policy icon, Secretary of State in the Nixon and Ford administrations, probably one of the more influential foreign policy figures in American history. Well, Donald Trump has been meeting with Dr. Kissinger now for the better part of an hour. And you might notice that there is so much importance in this meeting that Donald Trump went to Dr. Kissinger. It is all part of an effort on the part of the Trump campaign today to develop some quality cred with those in the foreign policy community led by Dr. Kissinger. This is Mr. Trump arriving about an hour ago at Dr. Kissinger's apartment, but he went to see him. Interestingly enough, it comes the same day where an economic team is being assembled for Mr. Trump, including the likes of Steve Moore and Larry Kudlow. And the guy orchestrating these powwows and trying to get this sort of kitchen cabinet dream team going is that fellow, Jeff Sessions, the Alabama Republican senator who has been very, very influential, an early backer of Donald Trump, long before others were supposedly falling in line. But to this Kissinger thing, that could be an interesting development in and of itself, because not too long ago, when Dr. Kissinger was on my Fox Business show, he had reservations about Mr. Trump, particularly when it came to his treatment of Muslims. Take a listen.
I would be concerned. I do not favor an exclusion on the basis of religion.
Would you worry if he were the party's nominee?
I have not endorsed him, to put it.
I guess what I'm asking, sir, I'm sorry, is if he were the Republican nominee.
If he were the Republican nominee, I would urge him not to make such a blanket exclusion, and I would on the whole be more comfortable with another nominee.
All right, and that meeting's still going on, even though there was a time when Henry Kissinger would have been comfortable with someone else. Donald Trump seems to be that guy right now, and for the former Secretary of State to be giving this amount of time to Mr. Trump indicates that these talks are very, very serious. We're also getting a sign that not only is Donald Trump trying to win over some foreign policy stalwarts, but economic stalwarts. And when it comes to those who have reservations as to what kind of Supreme Court picks he would make, well, he gave them 11 names today. 11. Shannon Bream in Washington with more on that. Shannon.
Hi, Neil. Well, the list is a mix of state and federal judges, all with a paper trail that is likely meant to reassure conservatives who've said things like they just don't trust Trump to choose the person who will fill Justice Antonin Scalia's empty seat. In putting together this list, the Trump team spread the names across the country in key states, by the way, and made sure that he gave conservative critics exactly the kind of potential justices they say they expect a GOP president to nominate. Let's talk about a couple. All right. A federal judge appointed by President George W. Bush, William Pryor, serves now on the 11th Circuit. He's a former Alabama Attorney General. He was caught up, by the way, in a Democratic filibuster when he was originally nominated. He was recess appointed to the bench by President George W. Bush. His permanent appointment to that bench was part of a deal reached by the bipartisan Gang of 14 in the Senate back in 2005. Judge Dianne Sykes, she's also been on conservatives' wish lists for a long time. You know, there are currently 3 female justices on the court. They are all liberal, though, and court watchers, especially conservatives, have felt that Sykes maybe could be a counterbalance to them. She, too, was appointed by Bush 43 and serves on the 7th Circuit, where, by the way, she's ruled against tough gun restrictions in the Chicago area. Also, there are top contenders serving on state courts. They include Utah Supreme Court Justice Thomas Lee. He once clerked for Justice Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. He's also the brother of Senator Mike Lee, somebody we've heard mentioned as a possible Supreme Court justice nominee. They are both the sons of former Solicitor General Rex Lee. By the way, interesting to note that at least one of the folks we tracked down on this list today said they'd never been contacted by the Trump team. They had no idea they were being considered or vetted in any way at all. Neil?
All right, Janet, thank you very, very much. There's one justice in there who probably will regret having tweeted some not so fine things about Donald Trump, and that is the Texas Supreme Court Justice Don Willett, who over the past year has said some just very unsavory, sometimes biting comments on Mr. Trump. I don't know why a justice would be tweeting anyway, but anyway, he did. And even though he did come out with these lists of names, I seriously doubt that that was known when this list came out. But I could be very, very wrong. The fellow is an expert on all things legal and much, much more. Our judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, what do you think of the list that you saw? Who intrigues you?
I think that Donald Trump has succeeded, or is attempting, I should say, to demonstrate the seriousness with which he has promised to appoint a nominee to succeed Justice Scalia with a person who is of like mind. Put aside Justice Scalia's unique talents and brilliance and personality. Each of these people would fit that bill of being a serious conservative in the Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan sense. However, and here's where I fully agree with Shannon, Judge Bill Pryor, who many of us know, who sits in the Circuit Court of Appeals in Alabama, would be the closest to Justice Scalia.
All right, Judge, I don't mean to interrupt you, my friend, but Donald Trump wrapping up this meeting with Henry Kissinger on the east side of Manhattan right now. This is at Kissinger's private residence on the east side. It was very unusual for Donald Trump to come to him, but for the better part of the hour to show the importance and the significance and the stature of the former Secretary of State, Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, went to see him. I apologize, Judge. He's leaving there now, but continue that fine thought.
It's actually, I think, Neil, consistent with what we're talking about. This is an outreach by Donald Trump to the traditionalist wings of the establishment wings, if you will, of the Republican Party to demonstrate his bona fides. I do not think this has ever happened in American history that a presidential nominee, he's not the president yet, of course, has said, if I get elected and if that seat is still vacant, I promise to pick one of these 11 people. These are people that the Democrats will oppose seriously. None of these is a consensus candidate. They're all in the Justice Scalia mold. As I was saying about Judge Pryor, a fierce pre-Vatican II traditionalist, pro-life Roman Catholic who probably would have voted along with Justice Scalia on virtually every case had he been on the Supreme Court at the same time.
But, Judge, isn't this about winning over the conservatives, the so-called establishment of the Republican Party, many of whom have doubts about whether, Donald Trump is conservative enough or would, in fact, present a conservative justice nominee, and that if you can assuage them of that concern, meet with Dr. Kissinger, who's talked about the global terror threat in sort of academic terms,
right,
what we have to do step by step, being less cowboyish, as that's been a rap against Donald Trump, that this is all a concerted effort that we'll bring up with Jeff Sessions, who's orchestrating these meetings, even on the economic team, and getting a brain trust going and winning over the doubters.
Well, look, these are all for a person who has been doubted by the mainstream of his party, but yet has received the tens of millions of votes in the primaries, and who now is the presumptive nominee. If I may, these are all steps in the right direction. Legal, judicial, foreign policy, economics. All the people he is talking to or about are well-respected, highly regarded traditionalists by the establishment wing of the Republican Party. And if he's serious about all of this, if he can persuade them that he's serious about all of this, he's wrapping his arms around that wing of the Republican Party so that by the time they all get to Cleveland together in July, they are unified behind him.
Judge, do you know this Don Willett, the Texas Supreme Court Justice? Much has been made of him. This is Trump, by the way, leaving his Henry Kissinger meeting just a short time ago. But that all of a sudden they discover he's had all these tweets out, that is Judge Willett, critical of Mr. Trump. Do you think Trump or his people knew that? Do they care? What?
They probably don't care, but the justice himself might have an issue here, because the rules of ethics that govern judges, this is why they don't stand on soapboxes or come on television at night, prohibits them from attempting to affect the outcome of a public issue by some means other than in their courtroom. Stated differently, they're not supposed to give tweets or op-eds. They're supposed to stay in their ivory towers.
I got you. Well,
don't ask me if I did that, but these guys are supposed to do it.
Well, you don't do that. You don't do that. By the way, this list means nothing to me because you're not on it. Total waste of time. They couldn't make it a dozen?
Tell Donald that the next time you interview him.
Exactly. Well, don't hold your breath. All right, Judge, thank you very, very much. All right, in the meantime, and Jeff sort of his piece is the end of his show. What the heck is going on with this civil reaction in the markets? We were down about 100. Earlier in the day, we'd been up almost triple digits. And again, a lot of this seesawing on minutes we just got out of the last Federal Reserve meeting. I mean, this is some weeks old here, in which they seem to be telegraphing the likelihood, I stress the likelihood, that they are going to raise rates next month, and that it would only take a string of weak data or some other jarring event that would stop them from doing that. So the markets now, which little more than 48 hours ago were not ready to see a rate hike and didn't want to think that it could happen, well, now they've braced themselves. It could happen next month. Happy summer. By the way, the fallout politically, ho-ho, you don't even want to go there. But I will go there a little bit later. In the meantime, Donald Trump taking these assurances to build up his bona fides. The guy is orchestrating that and doing a pretty incredible job of connecting all these disparate groups. Senator Jeff Sessions is next.